Okay, so this is the I got a little I was disconnected suddenly. So here's what I was going to do in one fell swoop. We'll do a little bit differently. So talked a little bit about the algorithm that was there, and now so this is my solution. So the way that I approached this was to write it out myself, score it, hopefully be close, and if there are differences between what I did and what the College Board did, I will show you that those what their solution was. And so certainly there's multiple ways to skin the cat, and we'll take care of. I'll show you what they any differences and talk a little bit about that. So the first thing that we're doing the constructor for the word pair list object that's passed with an array of words. We have the private um, array list of word pairs that's called all pairs. So that's been declared, hasn't been initialized. So the first thing I gotta do is that line there. I have to initialize an array list of word pairs. All right. So this thing right here is important. Making sure that that gets made as well. We'll go over the what the College Board would and would not accept based on that. So that's the first thing I got to do. Now I got to traverse my list, and what I said in the previous video was that we're starting at the first word and we're going through the second to last. That's why I gotta. When do I stop? I'm not going all the way to length because that would get me all the way to the end. And the next, so that's the first thing. So I'm going to traverse starting at the beginning, ending the word prior to the last word of that array of words. All right. I did this. I like doing temps. Yeah, it takes more memory, a little bit slower, but especially on high stakes tests like this, there's no default in doing that. So just sometimes it's in for ease of space. You could definitely do all of this stuff in one big fat line and just hope that the reader reads it correctly, or again, take your time and create a bunch of temps. And sometimes it's a little bit easier to write and read. That's what you're going for. So every time through my outer for loop, I'm going to get the word that is at that particular element. All right. So you can kind of see I'm starting at the first word of words, and then again going to the second and the third, and ending at the second to last. All right. Now I've got to go through the uh, the array a second time. All right, so I've got it's a nested for, and notice what I'm doing there. I'm starting not at I, because then I would be getting the same word twice. I don't want to do that. I want to start at the next one, so I'm going to add one to it. And this is why it's really important that I not go all the way to the end. Right? Maybe there's an if statement that I could write. Sure, that's true. But this way, because I'm setting j to I plus 1, if I went all the way to the last word, I'd be off the j would be off the array. So that was my solution. Stop one before. The inner loop is going to go all the way to the end, incrementing both of them by 1 each time. All right. So once I do that, I'm going to create the next word and store that in a temp. So every time I'm going through J's incrementing, I'm going to be getting the next word through that list. So next is just a temp variable holding the second word in that I want to join together. All right. So now I got to make a new word pair object. I think a common mistake on this question was that students, once they had first and next, just they didn't actually make the word pair object, that they tried to add those to that array list, all pairs, that they had those two and they would stick them together and off we go. So no, you can't do that. Why? Because all pairs is an array list of word pairs. So I've got to make a word pair object. Again, another temp, mind you. And now that I've done that, now I've got a word pair object. Well, that I can add to this array list. So that's basically the last thing that I need to do in my in the constructor is now that I've made made the word pair temp. I can add temp to that. That's going to get created. I'm going to cycle all the way through. And that is it. All right. Talked about that. I think I've killed that horse several times. All right, so this is the way. This is the rubric that the College Board used in grading this. So Part A was worth 5. Sometimes students feel like Part A is going to be fewer points than the Part B. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not. You just got to attack it like nobody's business, and not worry about how many points a particular part is actually worth. All right, so how do you get the points? You get a point if you create an array list and assign it to all pairs. So both of those things need to be true. Notice that there's a fair amount of flexibility on what this means. All right, we'll talk about that in a second. You got to access all the elements of words. Got to construct a new word pair object using distinct elements of words. So if you just made a new one that was string literals that you created, they are not going to give you that point. That you add all the necessary pairs of elements, and that when you exit, all pairs contains all of the pairs, and there's nothing, you haven't duplicated any, right? So you didn't start at 0 on both the inner and the outer loop, for example. Yeah, so I do think that there's a little bit of I'm not exactly sure how they distinguish some of these guys. So if you did start at 0 on both, you would have all the necessary pairs, or you'd have some extra ones in there. So in that situation, you'd get a point here, but you would not get a point the last point. The other thing that, oops, sorry about that. The other thing that notice that, so this was a note that if you returned the array list or you returned some value, you would lose a point. So constructors and voids don't return a value. So here are some extra notes. So one thing they said at the first point was, do you initialize all pairs? Here are different ways of doing that. All right. So if you did not specify that these were word pair objects that you were creating, they're still going to give you the point. That's very nice of them. If you had the open and close brackets, which we've never ever done, they would give you that point. So there's a bunch of different ways that they're allowing you to do that. If you refer to all pairs without having initialized all pairs, okay, that's a problem. So that you're not going to get the point if you were to do that. If you have bounds errors, obviously you're going to lose points for that. If you misuse, again, notice those are down here. They're adding only consecutive words, so I and I plus 1. I could see that being a very common thing that students would do, and that you're not going to get the point. You know, so you're not going to get a point. You will get a point, and probably add an and. That seems like it's yeah. Not quite sure what they meant by that. So I'm not now moving backwards. Sorry about this. All right. So just going through all of this, I don't know if you need to see all that, but if you look at mine and look at the rubric, I think I would have gotten all 5 points on that. All right. So that's a solution. That's the constructor for that. The second thing that you're asked to do is to write the code that is going to return how many word pairs are the same. All right, so there were 2 thes in example number 2, and so there would be a word pair the first word and the second word would both be the. That would be a match, and so I want to count how many times does that actually happen. All right. So here is again my algorithm for that. I need to create a counter variable, initialize it to 0. I traverse the word pairs or all pairs array list. I need to get the first and the second element using those getters that they identify previously in the first part that we didn't really have to mess with too much. But yes, now I need to use those. If both of them are the same, that's going to be using the strings method dot equals. Then if that's the case, I'm going to increase the counter by 1. And then when I'm done with all that, when I get through the loop, I've accessed all of the elements from that array list, then I'm going to return counter. Right? So pretty simple and pretty straightforward. Hopefully not too difficult. This is part B, not part A, by the way. All right, so there's the signature for the num matches. There's no parameter. There's my counter that I'm going to set to 0. Here's my way of going through. I don't need to access which, then get the index rather of where I'm at in my loop. So using a for each loop, starting with, that way I'm getting the first and going all the way to the end. That's using a for each loop makes some sense in this case. Again, I like using temp variables. It's a little bit longer code to write, more stuff to get down on paper, but I think it's a little cleaner, a little faster maybe. Simpler to read, simpler to write. So I got to get the first. Get first is the getter from the word pair object. I'm going to do the same thing for the second, called that getter for that. Now I've got the first and the second. The next thing to do is test if they're the same. So if first dot equals second, I don't need double equals true. It just is a way of just sort of making sure that, yep, it's true. So either way is fine. So what is going to happen if that's the case? Well, I want count to increment. So count plus plus is going to do that. I'm almost done. This is a very common thing that students do too. All right, I did the heavy lifting. I counted them all up, and I'm done. Close curly brace, close curly brace. But remember, this is this returns an integer. So the last thing I got to do is return count. I don't know what happens if you were to write magic happens. So I have no idea how to do that. Right, magic happens, count, and then count if they would give you the point or not. That I know that's going to be, or that's very common. That is part of the rubric is did you return something, because it's easy to overlook. So that's my solution. Here is the rubric. It's only the first one was 5. This one's only 4. I got to access all of the elements of all pairs without going out of bounds. I got to call. I get a point if I call get first and get second. So sometimes reading their questions carefully, like, oh, they have this extra thing in there. Yeah, I'm going to call it. You're going to get a point. Do you have to do it well? Do you have to utilize it? And nope, you just got to call get first and get second, and presto, you get a point. The third thing I got to do is I have to compare the first and the second, make sure that they're the same. So either compared to equals 0, I use the dot equals, either one is going to work, and count the number of times that the like pair values are the same. So pretty straightforward. That's annoying, isn't it? And my battery's running low. Hang on. So let me try to do that. All right. So the only thing that really I wanted to point out here is, there's not a lot of extra things in terms of getting out of how to lose a point. If you refer to the all pairs as an array instead of an array list, that would be problematic. Using the thing I wanted to point it out was this: you cannot use double equals when you're comparing the equality of objects, and string, my good friend, is an object. All right. And also, again, so, I count them all up, count plus plus, but if you never set it to 0 to begin with, you're not going to get the point. So some small but kind of critical things to keep in mind as you're going through that, right? Yeah. So again, if I look at my code and theirs, it's pretty darn similar. So they did not do these temps. So I will concede they didn't do that. So they had wp.getFirst.equals wp.getSecond. That's all they had, and then had their variable incremented if that was the case. So again, multiple ways to skinning the cat is one. Right? No. More right than the other? Obviously not. Instead, again, if you're able to do that, I try to break it down into really simple tasks so that my lines don't get too long. I feel like it's easier to make mistakes or forget something if I try to do 3 different things, 5 different things in a single line. So that's it. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to put up a little video of for question 3. You did that yesterday. Hopefully that made some sense to you. And again, I hope you're doing well. These are really crazy times. I'm trying to get a handle on how to push this out remotely. I think computer science is a relatively easy thing, or so I thought, to get out to folk in an online fashion. I do feel it's a little one way at this point. It's me to you. And maybe we'll try to figure out ways of getting things more interactive and bringing people together and all that good stuff. So anyway, hopefully you find this a little bit of a distraction and that you enjoy it. Please reach out. Let me know if there's anything that I can do to help. If you have suggestions or ideas, or maybe another teacher used a different tool that you thought was really effective and that might work here, I'm totally open ears for that. Yeah, so my first video, we'll keep going on it, and I'll see you down the road. All right, take care. Bye. Click stop.